Before we start the video, please don't be a Baka and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. I will assure you your little effort will help me a lot. Now back to the video. Just then, a large number of guards emerge from the museum, recognizing Jian as the one who stole the divine artifacts. This makes Jian realize that he was being chased, while Hugo inquires about what he stole. Pointing to the huge sack, Jian states that these are the few things he stole. Looking at the sack, Hugo realizes that he has stolen the entire vault of Yangwei, to which Jian asks if he didn't do well. This causes Hugo to laugh and call him crazy. Meanwhile, the guards state that they need to catch him right away, but their head reveals that he is not someone of their caliber. He reveals that they have called someone who matches his monstrosity, against whom he will not stand a chance. Just then, a stormy wind suddenly began to blow, leaving Hugo shocked. In the next moment, a creature with huge wings leaps up in the sky from above the museum's roof, and the head of the guard states that it is finally here. Just done, the monster jumps down to the ground, revealing itself to be the household divine of Ares, the beast of riches, Pishu. After landing in front of them, the gigantic creature begins to roar. Seeing it, Hugo advises Jian to simply throw away the things he stole and run, while Jian tells him to stay still. Stating that he is a person with a plan, he turns to Lime and asks for his sword. In response, the body of Lime begins to emanate a bright light, and its eyes glow with the symbol of a sword in them. After some time, it erupts a sword from its mouth, and Jian grabs it, smiling confidently and standing in front of the monster. Jian holds a small dagger-like sword and thinks that using it against the household divine would be tough. So he tells the sword to show him its original form. Suddenly, a strange energy surrounds him, leaving Hugo confused. This energy transforms the short, ordinary-looking sword into a giant, formidable, and powerful sword, which Jian finds somewhat usable. Following this, he receives a notification that the divine artifact has awakened due to the power of Ophiuchus. As a result, the sword has been given a critical head attribute, sharpened, and its attack power has increased. Considering that he has acquired the new skill called the 13th sense, Jian smiles and looks at the creature, able to clearly see all of its weak spots. Being able to see that, he lifts his sword and leaps up, determined to wreak havoc. Watching that from a distance, Hugo thinks that it is typical of Jian to attack first and that he always manages to defeat the challenges directed at him, even if they appear reckless. Considering that, he smiles, encouraging Jian to defeat the enemy. However, just then the monster lifts his foot in the air and seemingly crushes Jian under its feet, leaving Hugo shocked. With fierce intent in its eyes, the monster stands confidently when its foot suddenly begins to tremble. Just then, Jian emerges from underneath the foot, holding it up with a single hand of his, and states that it is now his turn. Shocked, the monster stares at him when Jian, with a single strike of his sword, cuts the foot of the monster, causing it to experience immense agony. Just then, he gets a notification that the beast has started to use its abilities, making him confused. Suddenly, the monster begins to roar loudly and starts sucking up all the riches in its surroundings. Seeing this, Jian smiles, stating that it would not have been beaten up if it had stayed still. With that, he holds his sword up and leaps up in the air once again. Activating the trait of snake catch, he strikes the sword onto the ground with such force that it shatters the ground, hitting the beast and causing it to fall down. Following that, the destruction starts to spread far and wide, leaving everyone shocked while Jian stands still, smiling with confidence. Looking at the massive destruction caused by a single strike of his sword, Hugo realizes that Jian's power is the same as when he was in his prime. Meanwhile, Jian stands confidently in front of the formidable beast lying on the ground and receives a notification that his zodiac experience points have increased by defeating the beast. Following that, he receives a notification asking whether he would like to bring that beast into his household, leaving him confused. Considering that he has the ability to control the household divine that only the 12 saints possessed, he approaches the beast and touches it, causing a bright light to engulf the beast. This causes the beast to rise once again, followed by a notification that it has now come under Jian's household, becoming his underling. Following that, the beast decreases its size to be hugged by Jian, its new master, while Jian thinks that since it is the beast of riches, it can be used by him to store all his treasure. Looking at Jian holding the beast, Hugo realizes that he has turned the household divine into his underling and wonders what happened before his return for him to have gained such ability. Just then, Jian receives a notification that he can give a name to the beast. After some thought, he suggests the name Piggybank for it, leaving Hugo shocked at his use of such language. At night in Hugo's house, he vents his frustration on Jian, calling him a traitor and stating that he does not know how worried he was for him. Meanwhile, Jian, who was busy fixing his divine artifacts, states that he got married and was enjoying life with his family while his friend was stuck in the tower. He continues to voice his complaints and disappointments caused by Hugo, intensifying his frustration. Getting up, Jian states that he will not be able to stay at his house, but Hugo says that he can stay there since he lives alone. Thinking that he might be divorced, Jian tells him to cheer up, leading him to explain that this was not what he meant. Deciding not to discuss that further, Hugo asks about what happened in the tower, thinking that both his wife and his son are fanatics of Jian and he should not tell them about him. Hugo mentions that he was fighting outside the tower and thus doesn't know what happened inside, and he asks why the other saints were carrying the head of Crimson Eye instead of Jian. In response, Jian reveals that there is a sad story behind it, explaining that he was backstabbed and thrown into a trap where numerous calamities were swarming. To make matters worse, the supposedly dead Crimson Eye came back to life, shocking Hugo. Jian clarifies that the Crimson Eye they saw wasn't its real body. He discloses that the real Crimson Eye was deep inside the tower, and he eventually managed to defeat it. However, the real problem was not the Crimson Eye but the tower's administrator, who had the power to revive the dead calamities, but he somehow managed to fight his way out. Finally, at the end of a struggle, he killed the administrator and collapsed after using up all his strength, leading to his death. However, he reveals that after he woke up, those monsters were no longer in the cave, and he is not aware of how he obtained his current abilities. However, Jian is certain that the person who backstabbed him knew about the complete structure of the demon tower. Therefore, he wants to teach them all a lesson, especially the one who betrayed him, and he wants to prepare for that. To do so, he needs to create equipment to use against them, so he activates his creation workshop skill. The interface asks if he wants to use materials to make a divine artifact, confusing him. After a few moments, a log of usable materials appears, including those obtained from defeating various monsters. Looking at all the materials, Jian decides to experiment by using them all to create an artifact. Thus, the creation of divine artifacts commences, engulfing the entire house in a bright light. Finally, the creation of a divine artifact is complete, resulting in the formation of Ego, an imitation horse that can absorb the magic power of anyone the owner touches. Examining it, Jian considers it great, thinking that a divine artifact with an ego can grow on its own, while Hugo starts applauding, surprised by Jian's ability. However, as Hugo looks closely at the horse, he remarks that for high-grade equipment with an ego, it doesn't look that cool. Enraged by his comment, Jian asks if he is serious, mentioning the amount of effort and materials he put into making it. Stating that he was thinking of using the remaining material to make equipment for Hugo, Jian asks if he should forget about it. Hearing that, Hugo changes his statement, calling the design to be amazing, considering Jian a genius for, and calling himself insane for not treating the divine artifacts with respect. Hearing that, Jian puts the divine artifact into his sack and states that it will depend on how he performs from then on, mentioning that they need to start by dealing with all the saints. Confused, Hugo asks how they will be able to do it, considering that it will not be easy to get other saints out of their own territory, yet Jian states that it would be enough to draw them out. Saying that he takes out a royal divine artifact of Ares called the Safe of the Golden Fleece. Seeing that, Hugo remarks that it is one of the top artifacts among the royal artifacts and asks why Jian would bring it out when he cannot use it. In response, Jian starts to mock him, stating that he has heard about him having no money, so he brought it along to fund them, which angers Hugo at being called poor. Jian explains that the higher the grade of the divine artifact, the more materials it would cost. He shares the idea of using it to multiply their materials and make high-grade divine artifacts they can use. Hearing that, Hugo asks how they are going to do it, stating that there is no one among them who can activate it. Upon this, Jian asks if Hugo cannot use it, but Hugo explains that he is not the Aries saint but a Sagittarius saint. Although Jian understands that, he still thinks that Hugo can use it. However, Hugo believes they should find another method since he cannot do that. Jian reveals that he has already sent a declaration of war to the broadcasting station, leaving Hugo shocked. Frozen in disbelief, Hugo asks him to repeat what he said, while Jian calmly states that they need to think of another way. Realizing what Jian has done, Hugo, engulfed in shock, starts to call him a crazy person. Meanwhile, in the Blue House, an official meeting goes on, where one of the participants insults all the other members for being unable to kill one spider and getting humiliated. The person speaking is the Leo Divine Cadre captain named Oliver, who continues insulting the others even as they request him not to use such words. In response, he states that he has heard about someone unknown who has killed the Spider Queen and asks if Lee Jian really came back alive. This causes them to burst with anger when the Gemini Divine Cadre captain remarks that Oliver seems to be too obsessed with the heroic stories of Lee Jian. However, Oliver thinks that if it is Jian, he can surely do that, giving the reference to the subjugation video, yet the Gemini representative argues that it was only possible because of the buffs and weapons. He states that if they had received that kind of support, they would have done better, causing Oliver to laugh as he remarks that they do not seem to have received it, which led to their failure. However, the captain still insists that they were the ones who killed the Spider Queen due to the sacrifice of their S-rank disciple. This causes Oliver to mock them, stating that he was not aware of them having such a powerful person on their team and that they will have to look for it in the Spider Queen's stomach. This turns the mood of the meeting extremely serious, and the head of the meeting feels frustrated, wondering how the Blue House ended up becoming a den for such thugs. Just then, a person hastily opens the door and enters the room, telling the president that something significant has occurred and asking him to watch the news. In the news, the broadcaster reveals that their station received a mysterious package a while ago. Inside the package were pictures of Yang Wei, along with a note that read, "I'm back," the handwriting analysis of which confirmed that it was from Li Jian. As Hugo watches the news, he feels shocked and turns angrily to Jian, asking why he would send such a thing. Jian explains that it is simply a declaration of war and a notice for them to prepare for their impending death. However, Hugo states that Jian killing Yang Wei was already a major problem, and he should not have made such an announcement. In response, Jian reveals that Yang Wei is not dead, surprising Hugo, as he continues to explain that although Yang Wei is alive, he is not truly living. Confused, Hugo stares at him when Jian suddenly turns to him, holding a large stuffed bunny, and says that this is Yang Wei, leaving him annoyed. Jian reveals that under his zodiac sign, Ophiuchus, he has acquired several constellation skills, including the Creation Workshop, the Gaze of the Divine, and the 13th Sense. Additionally, he has also gained super regeneration skills, the Body of 100 Poisons, and the Battle Divine Instinct, making him much stronger than ever before. Looking at the stuffed bunny, Hugo feels shocked, wondering if it really is Yang Wei. Meanwhile, a voice similar to that of Yang Wei keeps coming out of the bunny, asking to be let go. Jian reveals that his abilities have gotten pretty good from the experience in battle, allowing him to restrain souls. Surprised, Hugo asks if it is even possible, but Jian changes the topic, considering it to be unimportant at the moment, and hands him a knife, confusing him. Jian reveals that the knife was the one stabbed into his back, putting him into the trap. Surprised, Hugo looks at the knife, thinking that, from its appearance, it does not look like an ordinary weapon. Hugo shares his belief that if Jian was stabbed, then it definitely wasn't Yang Wei. This prompts him to state that he will find and drown that person to death while torturing Yang Wei. Turning to Hugo, Jian tells him that he is going to the Divine Artifact store for a bit, and he asks the reason for that. Jian explains that Yang Wei told him he had seen that engraving somewhere in the store. Afterwards, Jian asks Hugo to lend him some of his clothes, and Hugo tells him to check the closet. After changing his clothes, Jian hands the bunny to Hugo, referring to it as slave number 2, and instructs him to guard the house. Hearing that, Hugo asks if there is a slave number 1 as well, and Jian states that it is him, leaving Hugo feeling enraged. Meanwhile, at the Broken Museum of Ares, a team of investigators from Aquarius arrives and looks at the destroyed surroundings. One of them contacts their leader, telling her that they cannot find the Ares saint there and cannot sense any divine energy either. Hearing that, the Aquarius saint Sophie Marty expresses her confusion about where he went. Her assistant shares the suspicion that he disappeared with all the wealth, prompting her to state that it would be quite bothersome if he made a deal with another saint behind her back. As she wonders where he went, her assistant shares the belief that Li Jian might have kidnapped him. Hearing that, she begins to laugh hard, stating that her jokes are not funny, and uses her water energy to hit a servant standing behind her. Realizing that she is frustrated by her remark, the assistant quickly apologizes to her, stating that she said something unnecessary. In response, she assures her that it is okay and states that she will be heading to the store to sell her divine artifacts to prepare funds for the drachma auction. While she is busy on the call, another of her assistants enters the room, informing her that other saints have also applied to participate in the auction, leaving her shocked. Meanwhile, in a gym, people look in surprise while a strong and muscular person is busy doing a hard weightlifting exercise. Just then, another person appears from behind and informs him that Li Jian's divine artifact will appear in the auction. Hearing that, the person throws the barbell away and smiles excitedly. The person, who is actually the Leo Saint Stephen Marker, turns to his assistant, stating that those divine artifacts will be theirs. After some time, in front of the divine artifact store, Jian and Sungjae appear through teleportation. Jian remarks that it is quite a convenient method, while Sungjae tells him that despite being an expensive method, it is free for Gemini affiliates. In front of them is a colossal divine artifact store complex. Turning to Sungjae, Jian thanks him, stating that he was looking for an appraiser, and he introduced him to an SS rank 1. In response, Sungjae smiles, stating that it was nothing while thinking about his captain, who was impressed a lot by Jian defeating the Spider Queen and promised to support him fully. Just then, he receives messages from his boss telling him to try and convince Jian to join their cadre, and he takes a sigh. Looking at his expression, Jian asks if his boss is bothering him after that incident and puts his hand on Sungjae's shoulder. Jian then gives the dagger back to Sungjae after converting it into a divine artifact, stating that he used it well against the monsters. Looking at the dagger, Sungjae states that it was rusted before, but Jian tells him that he fixed it and that its effects are a little different, telling him not to be surprised later. Hearing that, Sungjae thanks him while he looks in front of him, asking if it is the place. Looking at the huge building in front of them, Jian inquires if this is the place where the SS rank appraiser is. Meanwhile, within the artifact store, the people stare in surprise, wondering if someone like that can be in such a place. In front of them stands Sophie, the Aquarius Saint. Reaching the store manager, Sophie states that she has to sell some divine artifacts to the appraiser before the auction, but the manager tells her that the appraiser is busy with someone else. While feeling deeply angered from within, she smiles, stating that it is alright and she can wait around the area. After that, she begins to wait in front of the building while wondering who is inside it. Meanwhile, inside the building, Jian looks at different artifacts placed on the shelves, feeling amazed at their high prices and ranks. In the meantime, the appraiser, looking at one of the divine artifacts brought by them, asks if Sungjae made this, and Jian turns to him, stating that he made it. Hearing that, the person who is an SS-ranked Virgo affiliate, Jin Myung, asks if he has some sort of connection with Lee Jian. In response, Sungjae tells him that the person is a pretender to be Lee Jian, and Jin Myung tells him to go away for a moment so that they can have a conversation. Complying, Sungjae turns away while Jin Myung turns to Jian, asking him about his relationship with Lee Jian and prompting him to ask why. Jin Myung states that most people do not know about it since he is famous for combat, but he is a legendary producer. Myung states that he has seen countless counterfeits in his life, but the artifact he has brought is different, and he can feel Lee Jian's handiwork in it. Hearing that, Jian remarks that he knows a lot about Lee Jian. In response, Myung agrees, stating that he is his disciple who received his favor, leaving Jian shocked. Jian thinks that he does not remember ever taking on a student. Considering him to be a liar, Jian wants to punch him, while Myung views the artifact closely, stating that his skills are quite impressive, which makes him seem like a direct student of Lee Jian. He then shows an old notebook to Jian, stating that this is the item that he received after Lee Jian recognized him as his student. Looking at the notebook, Jian remembers that this was the notebook that he lost. This makes him realize that Myung is the person who chased him around China, thinking that he has grown pretty old. Meanwhile, Myung continues to state that Jian gave him such useful information. Myung tells him that one day Jian left his lodging, leaving the notebook with production notes behind, making Jian realize that the notebook he thought he lost was actually stolen by him. Stating that the handwriting is very bad and he cannot understand it, Myung shares his belief that it might be Jian's book of ideas, while Jian knows that it is his hit list. He thinks of getting some useful information from an SS ranker like Myung. Meanwhile, Myung closes the notebook, states that it can be of more use to a talented young man like him, and gives it to Jian, telling him to keep it. Jian, holding the book, remembers that he had some designs he wrote down in the notebook, so it was a little disappointing when he lost it. Thinking that, he applies his magic power to the notebook, causing it to react and evolve into a divine artifact. Observing this, Myung realizes that it is a memory-storing divine artifact and acknowledges that Jian possesses a skill he has never seen before. Just then, another person enters and informs them that something has happened, and Myung asks what the matter is. In response, the person reveals that the Saintess is waiting outside. Hearing that, Myung wonders why the people are so flustered about the Saintess, while Jian feels surprised to hear about her. Meanwhile, outside the building, Sophie stands waiting with a huge crowd gathering around her, taking pictures. Looking at them, she wonders why they are staring at her, thinking that this happens whenever she goes out. Standing among the crowd, Sungjae wonders what she is doing, thinking that she only appears in official settings. After some time, she decides to go in and meet with him herself, thinking that the appraiser must buy their divine artifacts at a high price for them to afford the auction funds. Therefore, she walks towards the door while the manager stops and states that there is already a guest inside, making her wonder who the person is to treat her like that. Ignoring the manager, she enters the shop and finds Jian standing at the counter, feeling amazed to see such a gorgeous man. However, just then, a huge serpent appears in front of her, leaving her in disbelief and causing her to lose her balance. Feeling scared and bewildered, she wonders what the power was that she felt a moment ago, thinking as if hundreds of serpents had coiled around her. Getting up, she starts running out of the shop, stating that he has to leave the place immediately. Seeing her leave, Myung inquires why she's leaving so soon after entering, and Jian suggests she might be feeling sick. He is informed that because a Zodiac affiliate has approached him, his divine power has been sharpened, prompting him to wonder if divine power is different from magic power. In response to that query, he receives detailed information about divine power and thinks that new things and powers keep adding on. Turning to Myung, Jian inquires if the girl that just came in was the saintess, and Myung agrees while feeling surprised that he does not know. Myung reveals that she was the saint of Aquarius, Sophie Marty, leading Jian to feel shocked. After a while, he begins to laugh, asking if she really was the saintess. In his mind, he feels shocked at her transformation, considering that he didn't recognize her for real. Though he thinks she has become prettier, her rotten heart remains the same. He thinks that, if he divides Thethingshado as not like Kantofish bones pests and garbage, Sophie is a pest who considers her skincare routine to be more important than human life. Meanwhile, Myung states that he does not understand why people consider her to be a pinnacle of compassion and self-sacrifice while she is just a cruel and selfish person in reality. Myung reveals that she was Jian's physician and attempted to collect funds gathered under his name, but the government intervened, making Jian furious. Considering that Jian is taking her name so casually, Myung asks if he is acquainted with her, and Jian states that they are old friends. Meanwhile, in the empty, dark streets, Sophie keeps running, with her assistants following her. Remembering Jian, she wonders why he had to come back at that time. Thinking about the overwhelming magic power she felt in the building, she considers that the person gave her goosebumps just like Li Jian. Therefore, she turns to her assistant and tells her to go back to the shop and figure out who the person was, prompting her to ask what to do about the appraiser. After a short pause, she smiles and states that she has changed her mind, telling them to kill them all. Hearing that, her assistant argues that the appraiser is valued by Virgo quite a lot, and they also have to sell their items, but Sophie considers them to be nothing more than impertinent fools. Taking out a necklace, Sophie states that in return for doing it, she will give her a divine artifact and lend her divine power. However, the assistant explains that using power in a neutral district is bad. In a threatening tone, Sophie asks if she is refusing to follow her orders. Feeling pressured, the assistant states that she will definitely follow the orders since her will is the will of the divine. Saying that, she sits down in front of Sophie, who gives her the divine artifact as well as the power of the divine. Meanwhile, Jian, who is still standing in the shop, begins to feel water dripping down upon him and wonders where it is leaking from. In the district of the divine artifact store complex, Sungjae walks the streets having a drink. Suddenly, he notices a lot of water on the ground and wonders where it came from when it is not even raining. Observing the water closely, Sungjae thinks that it is faint, but he can feel mana from it. However, as he looks down at his skeleton-like reflection in the water, he feels shocked and suddenly backs off when a hand emerges from the water. Consumed by shock, he drops his drink when the water on the ground suddenly transforms into a body similar to his and crawls towards him. Feeling shocked, he wonders what it is when he suddenly hears a scream and turns around. In his surroundings, he sees all the people experiencing the same thing and feels confused about the situation unfolding before his eyes. Standing on the roof of one of the buildings, Sophie smiles and continues to use the power of the mirror of replication. She states that the ones that have been replicated are all A-rank disciples, but if ants attack in large numbers, they can even take down an elephant. Meanwhile, Sungjae calls out to her assistant, asking why a battle skill is being used in a neutral zone and telling her to cancel it. In response, the assistant, holding a divine artifact, states that everything has been done according to the orders of the saint, so he should not complain. Stating that all this is the will of heaven, she activates the divine artifact while Sungjae keeps stopping her from doing so. As a result, a huge ray of light emerges from the district and touches the sky. Following that, the assistant uses countless aqua powers simultaneously to ensnare the people into huge water bubbles that numb their senses. Turning to her army of water-made creatures, she states that she will go and take care of the person at the shop while they capture the appraiser. With that, the creatures transform into liquid water and surround her. Meanwhile, Sungjae, who is trapped in one of the water bubbles, wonders how he got there and tries to use his powers to get out but is unable to do so. He thinks that he needs to get out of the prison before he loses consciousness, but slowly begins to close his eyes, his senses becoming numb. Meanwhile, in the divine artifact shop, a lot of water gathers on the roof, causing Jian to feel confused. Looking at it, Myung wonders if something is happening outside, remarking that a suspicious mana is lingering in the surroundings. Suddenly, the water on the roof begins to gather around Myung, ensnaring him and leaving him shocked. At the same time, Jian feels a knife at his neck, which is followed by the emergence of the assistant, who forbids him from moving. She states that she does not have any ill intentions towards him, but the saintess is displeased because of him. She forbids him from doing anything stupid if he does not want his blood to be spilled unnecessarily. She reveals that she was ordered by the saintess to kill them both, but if they apologize for belittling her and buy their artifacts at a high price, she can save their lives. While Myung is contemplating it, Jian asks if it is normal for people to swing around knives in public spaces these days. Shocked, he looks up, seeing Jian breaking the knife barehandedly and stating that it was not the case in his time, leaving the assistant shocked. Jian then turns to Myung, telling him to have them pay for the damages while Myung is still consumed with shock, considering that he broke the divine artifact of Aquarius barehandedly. Feeling enraged at this act of his, the assistant states that she told him not to move and summoned a gigantic water beast. However, to their surprise, Jian defeats the beast with a single punch. Turning to the assistant, he asks if she has any more of these water beasts, stating that they feel pretty nice to punch. Meanwhile, the assistant stands shocked, thinking about how he destroyed an A-rank replication with a single strike and realizing that the saintess was right about him. Looking at Jian standing calmly on the counter, she thinks that he is dangerous and that she has to destroy him before he can harm Sophie. Therefore, she takes out a divine artifact resembling a necklace given to her by Sophie and tells him to block its power. Stating that it was made of the high-purity mana of the saintess, she summons orange-ranking water wolves that rush at him with a high-killing intent. Looking at those, Jian feels excited, thinking that Sophie is giving him a feast after such a long time. Turning to Myung, Jian states that he told him to take anything he liked and holds 2 unique daggers, stating that he is taking those for that time. Saying that, he leaps up and rushes towards the wolves coming in his direction. Reaching near them, he begins to strike them swiftly, remarking that the daggers are amazing. As a result of striking the A-rank summons, his experience points begin to increase, causing him to feel excited. After successfully defeating all of them, he receives a significant increase in his experience points as well as a lot of information about different powers. Meanwhile, the assistant stands still holding the necklace, considering it unbelievable for the summons of the saintess to be killed so easily. Just then, Jian calls out to her, asking for more. Trembling, she realizes that he is not someone she is a match for, and she might die if she tries to fight against him. Therefore, she starts running out of the shop, stating that he will not get away with this. Meanwhile, Jian stands back, laughs, and states that people like that aren't scary at all. Looking at him, Myung realizes that he is not an ordinary person. Just then, Sungjae enters, asking if Jian is okay. He says that the Aquarius disciples have started an indiscriminate attack, and he barely managed to escape. Looking at him, Jian states that they just finished the fight in the shop while he looks at his destroyed surroundings, wondering what happened there. Looking at the summons, Sungjae asks if they do not belong to the saintess, and Jian agrees, stating that sending them to a production class is just like asking him to use them as materials. Sungjae states that they need to get out of the place before more of them start to come. However, just as they are about to leave, Myung stops them. He states that 20 years ago, he followed Lee Jian around to watch over his production methods and clearly remembers his process of fighting monsters and obtaining materials from them. Considering his demonic expression and madness while fighting, Myung asks if he is Lee Jian. In response, Jian tells him to keep quiet, leading him to realize that he indeed is Jian. After that, Jian starts walking away, stating that he will come back for the materials, telling him to keep them safe, and saying that he also has something to ask from him. In response, Myung bows down, thanking him and requesting that he come again while they leave. On their way back, Sungjae asks why the saintess is targeting him, asking if she is an enemy of him, but he tells him to wait, stating that he will show him something incredible soon. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching, the Baka Senpai.